we all have access needs. There is this famous phrase from MB in the UK that says that disability is an open club. Wait enough and you will join it, because it's the reality. Disabled artists are a community that are already out of the norm. So you will be surprised at their performances, for sure. What I find really important is, and you mentioned, is the empathy and the opening for communication and negotiation. When it comes to care practices, this is something we're experiences with the disabled artists, for example, touring in a festival. We know how the festival's schedules are.
Welcome to the StageLync podcast, your access and connection to the live performing arts. In this podcast, you'll hear from some of the industry's most inspiring people from around the globe who create magic on stage and backstage. Our guests share their knowledge, passion, and the real stories of how a show comes together. We hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the StageLync podcast. My name is Robb, and today we are talking with Lorena Martínez Mier. Lorena Martínez Mier is a cultural manager, creative producer, and accessibility consultant. She has led impactful projects with organisations such as the British Council and the Mexican Cultural Ministry, and collaborated on events including the Veracruz Central American Ceremonies and the AlUla KSA season 2023. Her career reflects her passion for diversity and innovative artistic expression. She is currently the Consortium Manager for Europe Beyond Access. Lorena, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for hosting me and having me here.
Wonderful. So tell us right now, we'll start right from the back end of your career. What does it mean to be a Consortium Manager for Europe Beyond Access?
Well, it's interesting because the consortiums are very common probably in this part in Europe. We are a Creative Europe funded project. That means it's a project created by 10 different organizations that is funded by Creative Europe. That is a cultural fund from the European Commission. So being a consortium manager means that I work with 10 different institutions, 10 different teams with quite heavy and ambitious project that has many, many objectives and goals. And we have to work with 10 different cultures and cultural contexts for disabled artists through Europe. So what does it mean? A lot of managing, a lot of organization, a lot of multicultural understanding and complexities, and layer reading, probably.
Amazing. And the arts and disability, I think that there's just been a lot of awareness, I think, over the last few years of creating space and time for accessibility in the arts. Is this something that's a growing movement as far as you understand it to be?
Yes. The arts and disability movement as it is started in the decade of the 70s in the UK. It started because the government cut basic and necessary fundings from disabled people. And the disabled artists are the ones that's starting to create activist movement about it and start using art to fight against this cuts. For me, it's always an amazing case to share because those artists, this movement, are the ones that were able to influence the legislation, and they have the Quality Acts and everything that happened after that and on UK. So it's been around it means now almost 50 years, if we're talking about the 70s. But lately, the last probably 20 years, it's something, or 15 years, something that is more common through the globe. The people understanding not only the perspective of arts and disability as an audience, but also as creators.
Yeah, I think that there's been obviously a lot more sort of sensory-friendly performances are happening in, I guess I'm so speaking from my world, and then making sure that there's either sign language or, ways that people who have disabilities can experience a show. I feel like because you work cross-culturally, is there some cultures that are sort of embracing that more than others? And part of your job is to spread that awareness across the cultures that may be less inclined to create spaces for that?
Exactly. What you just mentioned, that's a really big part of my job. We work in 10 different countries in Europe, which have completely different contexts and legislation. And I might mention legislation a couple of times around this conversation because it's really relevant. Have the public policies in place are the ones that are going to support the development and to support tackling the challenges and the barriers that the different communities are experiencing. So yeah, it's completely different when we're talking about, the south of Europe, Spain, and you compare it to Poland, and then you compare it even to Sweden, where I'm based right now. And that doesn't mean, as we speak, that doesn't mean that probably as we have the idea that the Nordic countries will be more advanced, I can say Poland has a lot of relevant legislation and also upfronting the work of disabled artists.
What are some of the common mistakes that arts organizations make around accessibility and inclusion?
Well, the first one and the most common one, and probably this is the one that creates a domino effect, is that consider accessibility as an add-on. That you think about accessibility at the end of it. And you put it, we like to say it like as a band-aid. Okay, let's have a sign language interpreter. It's going to be on stage, something very common. And that's when I'm talking about accessibility for the audience. You don't even ask the company that is performing, what do they feel about the sign language interpreter? So most of them, because of lack of knowledge and disinformation, will feel that their performance, their project is going to be intervene and diminish because of having the sign language interpreter, because they don't understand the importance of it. So you will have it on a corner on the stage, really bad illuminated, that's lighted. That's also very common. I mean, that it has so it does look detrimental to the job because it's an add-on. It's a band-aid that were not thought at the beginning when you were creating your piece. How can accessibility can add into the aesthetic of your piece? So that's the most common thing. And then also, after you have the thought about accessibility, the one size fit all. That's not the reality. There is not, and people might disagree with me, but I don't believe there is not universal accessibility because each individual has different access needs. So, yeah.
I love that. I have a stage manager friend who has cerebral palsy, and one thing he said to me that still sticks with me to this day when I think about accessibility. He said, Anna, everyone has access needs. Everyone.
Yes.
It's just it's to what. And one of the things you can do as a person who curates art is to first ask, what is everyone's access needs? And if you democratize that question, whether you sit in the disability bracket or not, and I think to your point, it needs to be at the start and not at the end of the thought process, because in that way you can be truly inclusive.
Completely agree. This is something that is not related to the arts, but it's related to accessibility that is relevant to understand. As you said, we all have access needs. There is this famous phrase from MB in the UK that says that disabilities is an open club. Wait enough and you will join it, because it's the reality. We will all join in any moment a disability requirement because we grew old, because we have hearing impairment, vision impairment. It will happen. So what we need is to start to mainstream and standardize accessibility. There is this statistic that is amazing about, I believe, is social media. The percentage of subtitles used on the videos, it's around more than 80%. Because it helps you. It helps you when not only by hearing impairment, but also second language. English is not my first language. It's Spanish, and it will depend, like you said, in your part of the world. Thankfully, I have worked with Australian colleagues, so I'm kind of used to it. But if it comes to New Zealand, it's very complex to understand the accent. So I use English subtitles for a lot of the videos, or videos and gauges I have because I need it.
It's quite common, actually. I think I have actually started to watch. I mean, I've watched a lot of international TV, so I'm watching subtitles all the time, but it's quite common for me, even in an English-speaking show now, to have them up and going. When you're working with the companies and the regions that you work with, what's the first thing that you start to work on to heighten people's awareness, and what are the baby steps that somebody's looking to go, okay, I want to be more accessible, I want to include that? Where do you start in coaching them to become more accessibly friendly? That's a big question to answer, I know.
It is a big question, I know. First of all, and I would like to highlight something because this is relevant, and you asked me for accessibility, and thank you for asking that. But probably when we talk about artistic and cultural organizations, I really want to always highlight, first of all, the relevance and the importance and the artistic proposals of disabled artists. So I want to put that in the center. Usually this is how we would like to tackle the proposal. Like, you want this piece because it's fantastic. Who's the artist? That's really not so important in that part. But then how we start with accessibility, the first norm probably for accessibility for me is to make a self-assessment and understand where you are. Because you have to understand where you are, which is the accessibility you can provide in order to move there. Because, there are a lot of venues that are not historic buildings that you cannot build on top of it, and that you will have to be very creative to change certain things. But you have to acknowledge that. You have to know where you are. You have to know that there's no possibility to have an accessible bathroom in the third floor where you have your green rooms. So maybe then you will have to change your green rooms instead of having an accessible bathroom in that third floor. So the first thing would be the self-assessment. That's the first one. And second, focus on the things you will engage with and you are able to really change. Because also, this is very important. We always say accessibility is not a ramp. That's not real accessibility.
It sounds funny when you say it's not a ramp.
Yeah, it's the truth.
No, but it's true. It's 100% true. Yeah. Yeah. But also, I think that there's the artist and the on stage, but there's also the people that work behind the scenes as well that also have access needs. And I think a lot of time when people think about disability in the arts, they think about the people on stage. But I'm sure there's a whole, consort of people backstage wanting to have a career that also have disabilities, correct?
Yes, we have. I think we have the numbers in a previous report we did in European Access that is called Time to Act, that is based with the statistics in the European sector. Less than 5% of the cultural workers identify themselves as disabled, but the reality is that disability is considered 50% of the general population if we use the general statistics data. So there is a gap there. Also from self-identification, but then there is a huge gap, and then I will go probably to we're moving out of the art, but that is important because there is a lack of access in education and opportunities for several communities. We're talking in a specific about disabled community right now. So it is very difficult to engage with stage managers, producers, directors, a lot of people backstage because they do not have access to higher educations or to trainings and programs that will allow them to perform that role. So there is a relation in that. It comes from a vicious cycle, but it is.
For sure. I mean, if there's no pipeline to get them there onto the theatre to do that practice because of the inability to access education, then it starts there, right? It really, that's the source of the issue. It's such a holistic thing to try and tackle when you think about it. Is there anything that you've seen recently that technology or AI or other advancements that can help accessibility?
Yes, there are. And there are some of them that I would consider very basic, but that are so relevant for the deaf community. when the use of certain platforms are more friendly user for the deaf community because they can pin the sign language interpreter for online calls like the ones we're using. In one of them, it's really easy to pin the sign language interpreter, or they can even two sign language interpreters, because that's the good practice. When you have a meeting more than 1 hour, you should have two. Then the use of subtitles and the closed captions and the AI translation of the subcaptions. So that's also very, very user friendly. So in that perspective, it's super relevant. And there has been other developments that are still trying to figure out. We are working, and this is a piece and a artistic route that one of the disabled artists we're working right now is developing, is in understanding and exploring the audio description of dance. How can you describe dance for visually impaired audience? How it will be a poetic audio description or not? And then how will you do the translation using AI? And how can you train your own agent to use the poetic and narrative language that you are using for describing a piece? So there are a couple of things going on there.
You just reminded me of an audio describer I met a few years ago, and she used to audio describe the Cirque du Soleil shows in Las Vegas for people who were vision impaired. And apparently she told me this story. She accompanied somebody to a Cirque du Soleil show, and she was describing it all. And the person next to her also heard the description. And she was like, "You need to come to the shows because I never understand them. And you're able to explain the whole show to me." So it was just a funny side note, because I think sometimes the person who couldn't see got the best description of that show in the audience because I didn't know what was going on. But I think technology is amazing. You know, when we first started doing things like this podcast, some of the was a costly thing for us, right? And now, for example, our conversation here, it's very easy for AI to download the transcript of the conversation and then also put it in ChatGPT and say, clean up the ums and the ahs and the irrelevant parts of the conversation and bring it back to the thing. So those things are just now easy 2-3 steps that you can take after a conversation like this to make it accessible to people who may or may not be able to listen to the podcast, you know. So, and even, you know, the automatic way that we could take this transcript and get people to make subtitles for it on that as well. So it's, I think one of the wonderful thing about technology is in terms of helping that support, but it's about people putting those things together, correct? So especially in the arts, because there's got to be a way for them to sort of first acknowledge that those tools are out there, and then how do they implement them into the arts practice? Is that some of the advocacy that you do? Do you sort of help people get there in terms of some technology that can support their practices?
We are not right now with There Beyond Access focusing in arts and technology. It's just a broad spectrum of arts itself. But there are several artists that are exploring that route. For example, there is Kreateatern here in Sweden. They but a couple of months ago, I saw a performance where they have an avatar. The avatar was a signer avatar, and this signing actress was behind the stage doing the signing, and it was amazing. It was really, really fantastic to see that, because that opened the possibility to include performances when you do not have the actor on stage on the same city, can be somewhere else, and then can be performing at the same time. There is one Polish artist that is right now working in a recompilation of community activities and the city and the relation, how the people navigate the city. And she's going to create a VR visual map of those cities in a video. And there are different communities that are navigating the cities. She's working with disabled community, but also with elderly community, with queer community. So she's going to map these three experiences and how can you navigate a city based on this perspective.
That's super cool.
Yeah, they do an amazing job. They do. That's probably, I always say, why I do work with disabled artists, because they are disruptive. They are already outside of the norm. So it is really cool work.
They're creating that space for themselves, aren't they?
Yes.
What do you sort of find? This might be a difficult question to ask, but as you're working in these different cultures and you've got people who have disabilities in most of these places, is there challenges as they work cross-culturally as well? And are they different challenges or are they same challenges? And how do you navigate? I work in a cross-cultural environment, and just generally it's a lot of understanding and empathy to be deployed across different cultures. How do you approach that? And then also how do the disabled artists and people that you work with, how do they deal and navigate that cross-cultural challenge?
Okay, we're talking about two layers here in particular. One of it's the community itself. Probably that's something important. Disabled artists do this, define themselves as a community most of the time. So that that provide them the same belonging, certain similar life experiences. They are different disabilities, there are different life experiences, but they share a similar life experience. So that's something that happens a lot. But at the end, they are a very a community well formed and with tight ties. So that's one layer when it comes to the community. One particular community that I will highlight is the deaf community. Deaf community, they are a minority linguistic community. That's how they define themselves. And it's a reality. A Mexican deaf with a Japanese deaf, they will find each other more related than a Mexican deaf with me, that I'm Mexican, because they do have the same culture. So that's one part of it. And the other ones, what do we do? I have to say I'm very happy to be able to explore, because for me it's new, certain practices from the disabled artist community that is a care practice. The conversations when it comes to the disabled artists I'm working right now in Europe, that's something that's in Europe. I didn't know about this before in Mexico, is the care practice. They are working already, passing the accessibility as a checkbox, and we're the idea of creating care spaces and care practices that will receive the people and will accompany them while the journey, the artistic journey, the touring journey into a care space where your needs and your concerns are validated and accompanying them. It doesn't mean I have to understand them sometimes. And there is what I find really important is, and you mentioned, is the empathy and the opening for communication and negotiation. When it comes to care practices, this is something we're experiences with the disabled artists, for example, touring in a festival. We know how the festival's schedules are. You arrive 8 hours before, you set up, then you perform, and then let's go. Next one. Because that's the festival life for us when we are in backstage. But probably a disabled artist is not able to follow that rhythm and will need more time and will need time to relax, to really be able to rest. It's not relax, to rest the body in order to give a great performance. So how we as institutions are being challenging to change our practices and our rhythms, because at the end, and I'm saying because I'm a festival tribe also. I love festivals. I produce festivals. I'm used to that rush and I miss it. But the reality is not even healthy for us. Being 20 days with that rhythm, that's why we sleep 1 week after we finish the festival. So those are the conversations we're having now also, which sounds creep. And it's that. It's just we have to adapt and mold the time based on the specific needs for each one of us.
Yeah, it's so true. And we definitely, time, budget, all of the things that challenge the arts in terms of sustainability there has to be a tipping point where we bring it back to a balance that is sustainable for everyone, not just people who have disability, Is there a project that you feel like that you've been involved in, or whether it be with Europe Beyond Access or other projects where you feel like, oh, we're really making headway? Or is there something you're particularly proud of in terms of accessibility or inclusion that you feel that is a good direction?
I will say yes, the work I was doing in Mexico. And I started working in arts and disability movement in Mexico like 14 years ago. And it was because of a deaf theater company. And then I got involved and started developing different projects. And around 2018, I joined British Council and collaborate with them. And mainly it's because they had a arts and disability program, and that was one main focus. So for about 4 years, I was able to develop a lot of proposals and projects supporting the arts and disability in Mexico, and then in Latin America and in America in general because of COVID, and we started doing all these virtual proposals, so we were able to expand. So I'm very proud of that work. They were different big projects. We have one festival, Trazando Posibilidades, Tracing Possibilities in Guadalajara. It was a huge festival, more than 25 disabled artists from Canada, Mexico, and the US. We also have, a meeting where we will all sit and start. It was really more opening the space to say, what do we want to talk about? Where are we? Who are you? What do you need? I was very happy that I was able to put two institutions. That was the Cultural Ministry of Jalisco, the state that was hosting us, and us as British Council, that are two institutions, in a direct conversation with the disabled artists. Probably that was my first big moment in those 4 years, because after that, I was able to continue the momentum and engage the institutions, because that will make the commitment from the institutions. You were sitting here talking with the disabled artists, so what is your commitment? Share with the disabled artists, share with all of us. What's going to be your commitment within this movement? So yes, I'm very proud that we were able to present about 5 or 6 pieces to general audience, but then that we had 25 artists sharing their life, sharing their experience. And it was a great moment because at the end, we closed the program in British Council because there was no need. The artists are already working there. They have created a community that can support each other to continue the conversation.
Wow. Was there any performance of those artists that stood out to you the most, or was the most moving? What's a memorable performance that you were like, wow? Because, like you said, people with disabilities come with such an outlook on life and a perspective that not many of us may be able to understand. And I think that when it's manifested on the stage, can be some quite incredible art. So, is there one that stands out for you?
There is one that was not. There is one in particular, but there is a whole story about it. So, guide with me. It's fantastic because it is an actress. When I met this artist the first time, she didn't identify herself as a disabled artist. She was not part of the movement. And I met her doing The Three Sisters of Chekhov. That was amazing. It was a lovely piece. And then she continued doing castings to the National Company Theater, and we started a friendship, which now she's a really good friend of mine. But at that moment, it was a very actress audience moment. And we continued the conversation, and she joined one of the projects I was supporting. Again, she didn't self-identify as a disabled artist. But I do remember when I started talking with her for this project in particular, I jumped into the conclusion immediately. And she stopped me. And she said, no, I do not self-identify as a disabled artist, so I'm not sure why are you telling me this. But then, this performance, I can say this is the theater piece I've seen most in my life. I've seen it 8 times, and I can easily see it another 8 times. I mean, it's not touring anymore, and I constantly tell her, we need it back. And it's called Un Tutú Muy Apretado, a very shrink tutu. That is about a girl that is a fat girl that wants to take ballet classes. So that's why the tutu doesn't fit. So for me, probably it's not the performance, it's the story about this actress, because once she started collaborating with the different disabled artists and in these different projects, I'm very happy to say that now she's one of the leading artists in Mexico, that she's leading the conversation. She's working in an institution in the cultural ministry to support the disabled artists to be able to perform. So the power of it, and she always said, like, kids will come to her after her performances and tell her, I didn't know I could be an artist, because you are on stage, I can be on stage too.
That's beautiful.
Yes. No, done by her. Amazing, Sophia.
Wow, that's amazing. For our audiences, just because we're going to wrap up here in a minute, is there a message or something you want to tell? Our community is the live performing arts industry mostly. If you could leave them with a message on accessibility and inclusion, what would that be?
Could be probably two things. First of all, I highly invite you to go and attend disabled artist performances in the different shapes and forms, because as said, disabled artists are a community that are already out of the norm. So you will be surprised at their performances for sure. And the other one that you mentioned at the beginning, it was your question. Accessibility is not a band-aid. And accessibility can be amazingly creative and aesthetics if you include it. So it is a challenge. It is a creative challenge to include it in your piece and to see how will this enhance this piece. It's not online, but I can highly recommend seeing Bernardo Salva's House of Grey Eye Theatre from UK. It is just fantastic how you have sign language, closed caption. All of them are disabled artists. But that's the last thing you see. What you see, it's a beautiful Bernardo Alba's House performance.
Fantastic. Lorena, thank you so much for sharing your career and your support and advice on these topics. And I really appreciate you spending the time on the StageLync podcast. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I hope you enjoyed, as I did, this conversation.
We did. Thank you for listening to the StageLync podcast. StageLync is an online platform that gives you access and connection to the live performing arts. As a guest, you can read about live performing arts from across the globe and gain insights from performers and artists on stage and all the amazing people who work behind the curtain. If you are an industry professional, StageLync Pro offers jobs, networks, and career support tools, and you can build your own professional profile on the site. As a StageLync podcast listener, you are eligible for 20% off your StageLync Pro membership. Visit us at stagelync.com, and when joining, use the code SLPodcast. StageLync, that's StagelYnc.com.